It is my honor and privilege today to introduce Chet Billingsley. Chet Billingsley is a native of Minnesota who received the congressional appointment and did his undergraduate work at West Point. Later, he went to graduate school at Harvard University, where he received a master's in applied physics, with concurrent studies at Harvard Business School and MIT Nuclear Engineering Department. Mr. Billingsley has spent much of his career in the energy sector and has studied and worked in a broad range of technologies, including coal, liquefied natural gas, nuclear energy, nuclear waste disposal, geothermal, fusion, solar, heating, I hope I'm not blotching this one up, Chet, photovoltaics? All right, thank you. Oil, gas, and gas. Thank you. Oil and gas partnerships, wind and tidal power, plus helping to support the administration of all technology partners contracts for the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. Published infrared laser physics, Mr. Billingsley is well qualified and has a long interest in the beneficial middlings of the global climate driven by eons of long solar cycles and reinforced by the often misunderstood infrared retaining effect of our atmosphere's carbon dioxide blanket. Without further ado, I would like everyone to please welcome our honored speaker today, Mr. Chet Billingsley.
Thank you, Cleo, and thank you, Jessica, for allowing this to all be set up. That fancy introduction, I should remind folks that in the Salem witch trials, the judges were almost all from Harvard. And, we saw over time from, about 500 years or 50 years before Columbus through to about the Salem witch trials, 30,000, mostly women, burned at the stake. There's probably 100 people in the crowd for each one of those women being burned at the stake. So that means 3 million people observed that. And it never really stopped. So people can do really dumb things. And I'm going to talk today about some of the really dumb things that the government is doing and the hurt that it causes all of us, where they get power, very similar to how the people that judge those witches and put them in jail and so forth got a lot of power and prestige by doing that. Hopefully, we won't sit around and watch people being burned at the stake by figuratively squelching our economy so much that it causes harm to folks over a long period of time. Anyway, what I'll be talking about today is how I've watched energy over pretty much my entire lifetime. Now, this may be because I grew up in Minnesota. You know, you pay more attention to the climate in Minnesota than you do most places. And I was born in 1952, but the family stories a lot. I would refer to my spinster aunt, who would be about 112 years old now. So that would take us back to about 1910, that big dip before the 1940s. And this is a representation of the temperature that transgressed over my lifetime. And you see about 1940s, really it's 1938, it's very hot. Matter of fact, if you look at Texas, they have a temperature record from 1899 through to today. And in 1938, the highest record annual average temperature was 68 degrees. Normally now it's about 65. It never got that warm again until 2 years ago. So we have this reality that it was warm, it got cold, and got warm again. And the way you measure that the best is by looking at the rural temperature thermometers, because that's where people That stays the same. You avoid the heat island effect. Now, my very first thought on this was, I was a budding young lad and already a science nerd looking at popular science and so forth. And they said contrails were causing global cooling. And as a little kid, I looked up in the sky and saw a contrail here or there and said, well, that's baloney because there's just not that many contrails. And compared to the Earth, they're minuscule. But now, 2 days ago, I looked, and the people that are talking to us are saying the contrails are now causing global warming. So there's a lot of just sort of making things up. On the way here, I happened to look out the window of the car driving here, and from horizon to horizon, didn't see a single contrail. How could you think that is changing the climates? So we're going to try to look for objective truths, and there's two main points, and then the political result that sort of follows. One is that carbon dioxide is saturated in the atmosphere. And what I mean by that, there's a certain warming effect that comes from carbon dioxide. But like blankets on a bed, once you get to a certain level, you don't get any warmer. During the cold snap a couple years back, I bet nobody here put 7 quilts on to get extra warm. Maybe 3 would do it. Well, there's about 6 layers right now of carbon dioxide that are insulating the Earth. And if you put another one on, it really doesn't do anything else. And if it isn't carbon dioxide, well, what is causing that? And it's the sun. The sun fluctuates, not too much in its absolute intensity, but its position, because our orbit is different shapes and the Earth tilts. And if you can have a fairy tale told about how it's carbon dioxide, and you have to control energy because energy generates carbon dioxide, classic energies, then you can control everything. And that's the path that the Democrats have taken. And many people have heard this and echo it over a long period of time. But it's just not true, and I want to explore that. So by saturated, the idea is, if, for example, if you have a barn and you paint it red, it's red. If you paint it red twice, it's still red. It doesn't make much difference at all. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere right now is like blankets. And if you doubled the amount, it's like having 6 blankets on your bed, 6 quilts. And if you doubled that to 12, it's not going to make much difference. And that's sort of the situation we have. Just like if you have a red barn and you paint it again and again and again and again and one more time again, it's not going to be more red and reflect more red. And the infrared radiation coming from the ground up into space that's held back by the carbon dioxide in the air is saturated. It's not going to change and get any more if you add something to it. And now this is probably the only real scientific slide that I put in here. And you see right here is the carbon dioxide slice. And the green line on top is the radiation that would radiate into space in that little slice if we didn't have any carbon dioxide. And that would make it about 57 degrees cooler here. And that'd be like an average temperature of the cold snap we had a couple years ago. But because we have about 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide, it comes down to the black line there. Now, you may not really be able to see much, but there's a black line, and just a little teeny fraction lower is a red line. So if you, today, we're at the black line, and that's all the carbon dioxide that we have that's been generated by industry and so forth over time. And the red line is if we doubled the carbon dioxide, which would take about 100 years or so, maybe 200. And that just doesn't make any difference in the heating that will occur from carbon dioxide because it's saturated. Now, even though carbon dioxide isn't going to heat things up anymore, it's already there. You already have as many blankets of carbon dioxide across the earth as you ever need, and it's not going to heat up anymore. Carbon dioxide helps plants grow. If you double it, if you had corn that grew as high as your hip, and then you doubled the carbon dioxide, it would grow about to your shoulder in the same period of time. So carbon dioxide makes it possible for us to farm with less space and to get better crop yields and to not use as much water. And on the right, see, this is a tree with normal carbon dioxide levels. And this is a tree where they doubled the carbon dioxide levels. And you get 80% more, 180% of the yield. And worldwide, in terms of agricultural production, we think that has increased the agricultural yield by about 24% worldwide. And the amount of farmland that we use is only about 28% on a per acre basis. The number of acres you need to produce a certain amount is only about 28% of what it would be a number of years back. And about a third of that is because of the increase in carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide helps us grow and cuts down on land use. And we think here, well, that's a good thing, but think in the rest of the developing world, how important that is. Now, a piece that people don't normally think of it as an intuitive is that on the undersides of leaves is a stoma, little mouths, and the carbon dioxide flows into these little holes, and the plant uses that with water and oxygen, or with water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight, and makes sugars. And that makes the world go round from the sugars and these carbohydrates. Animals thrive by eating the plants. And the limitation is not getting the carbon dioxide in, it's keeping the water from going out. Because when the little stoma is open, 100 water molecules go out for every one carbon dioxide molecule that goes in. So if you have more carbon dioxide, you don't need as much water. And we're developing water or drought-resistant plants because of the carbon dioxide is there. So carbon dioxide doesn't cause any additional heating or any appreciable heating at all, but it is very beneficial. And then, but the government is saying it's this big bugaboo, and that's just not the case. The world is about 20% greener because we've increased the carbon dioxide from industrial processes since about 1940. Now, if it's not CO2, what is causing this uplift in temperature through the 1940s, the decrease to 1970, and the press from 1940 to 1970 was talking about global cooling. So until 1970, actually 1975, they were only talking about global cooling. And then from 1975 to today, they started talking about global warming. So we have to account for both of those things. And the thing that accounts for that is the sun. So this is a graph of the sun activity from 1880 to today. And you see that the sun activity and the temperature track. And that makes great sense. So we have an explanation for a short period of time. But really the granddaddy of all the control and change in temperature is the fact that the Earth's orbit is shaped like an egg. So it's shaped like an egg, and sometimes it's closer to the sun, and sometimes it's farther away. When it's close to the sun, if at that time the Earth is leaning towards the sun and the rocky areas are getting a lot of sunlight, then the world is going to heat up. If it is leaning away from the sun at that time, and the water is there, which doesn't heat as well, then it's going to be cooler. And these cycles, the egg shape changes or rotates through about every 100,000 years. The leaning of the Earth takes about 40,000 years. And then like a top, it swings more or swings less. Like when you spin a top and the top is getting set up and it wobbles back and forth. And that can increase the wobble by 10%, which increases the winters by 10%. The only reason we have winters is because the Earth doesn't rotate on its axis straight up and down. As much as it leans, that causes winter and then summer. So if it leans more, you get more winter or more summer. So we've got figures like 6% for the egg shape, 10% more winter for the leaning, and then it could be leaning towards or it could be leaning away. So we have numbers that our whole climate can change by 6 to 10%, which are large, huge numbers relative to climate compared to the 150 parts per million of a little bit of carbon dioxide. So these are the things that dominate weather. It's the Earth and how it leans. Now, this causes these oscillations that we've had for 500 million years. In this period right in here, this is the Jurassic period, for example. And things were lush and moist. And when the world warms up a little bit, then things get wetter and warmer. Now, if you look just at 50 million years, come in a little bit, you see that right now we're here. And this is cold, much colder than here. We're down at 1 or 2, and this is up at 12. And that's a big temperature change. This is a close-up of that section at the end, and you see it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the amount that it is swinging is 54 degrees, which is a tremendous amount. And when it's cold, that's where you have a mile-thick sheet of ice covering New York City. And of course, that makes it very tough for people to live. Where it's warm, where it says glacial minima, and right here, this is where we are right now. So we're at the top, we're at the warmest portion of a cold period. So we're at the end of an ice age, and we're at the warm period, but still at the end of the ice age. Hence, for 30 million years, we've had ice caps on Antarctica and Greenland, for example. If you look in just recently, we've got the Roman warm period, the cold dark ages, the medieval warm period. During the medieval warm period, they grew wine in England. And probably nowadays, nobody's had some recent excellent English wines. They just don't grow grapes there. We had the Little Ice Age where they were skating on the Thames. And now we have sometimes called the modern warm period. And this is all tracks that different changes in the sun that have happened over this period of time. But when you listen to the speaking points of the progressives, they say, oh my gosh, we've got to control climate. So to the 1.5 degree change, that's degrees Celsius, so it's maybe 3.5 degrees. So that is nothing. If I went into your house and changed the thermostat by 2 degrees, you'd probably not notice. Or if the temperature outside changed by 2 or 3 degrees, you wouldn't notice. Matter of fact, one of the big things that happened recently, is not huge, it happens all the time, every 2 to 7 years, is we're switching from El Nino to La Nina. Now, El Nino, and you see here's Mexico and the United States, and Texas is right about there. The warm water piles up off the coast of Mexico and increases the temperature about 9 degrees. And then trade winds change a little bit, and it shifts back, and the cold water piles up here, and the warm water heads over towards Indonesia. And when it does that, then it's cooler and drier. And when we have El Nino, it's wetter. Remember when they had all that snow in California, 20 feet of snow? Well, that was because El Nino was here, warmed the water. Warm water evaporates more moisture. The moisture drifts over the mountains and deposits as snow. And before then, it was La Nina, and we had the droughts in California, and all the reservoirs were down to nothing. Now they're full. So La Nina, dry and cold, reservoirs are down. El Nino, wet and rainy, reservoirs are full. Generally, I would say it's better to be a little warmer and a little wetter, much like Jurassic Park, let's say, having a lush environment. Right now, we're heading into La Nina, and there's a 9-degree swing here. And remember, the progressives and Democrats are saying, oh my gosh, it's an existential risk. You've heard that word, existential risk, many times. Existential, life or death. It's going to change 1.5 degrees. Oh my gosh. Well, it's just changed 9 degrees. Seems sort of pleasant that we had a pleasant, mild winter as opposed to the cold winter in 2020 and 2021. But none of those things are going to cause us to die. We've gone through this change, and nobody died. But for much less than this, we're being told that it's an existential risk, and we must give up the type of car we want to drive, change the fan in the ceiling, have a dishwasher that doesn't work. All these many things are because of 1.5 degrees, but we get a 9-degree swing every 2 to 7 years anyway, and don't even know it. And some people will say, well, oh my gosh, no, I have seen that carbon dioxide tracks with temperature over time. And that is sort of true. And you see here that the carbon dioxide used to be much higher. Now it's about 423 parts per million. But if you look here, it's 7,000. For this long section of time, including the Jurassic period, and that's sort of 200 million years ago, it was 2,000. And with the current level of carbon dioxide, we have 57 degrees of warming, but it's saturated out, it's tapped out. If that wasn't the case, then the temperature during this period would have been about 400 degrees, and over here would have been about 1,000 or 1,200 degrees, and it wasn't. So these are examples, long historic trends over the millennia that show that even increasing the carbon dioxide multiples of where it is today, and you don't have a problem. But why is there this sort of tracking? Why does the carbon dioxide track? It's sort of this fairy tale that's being told. And I call it the compost effect. This is just an example of somebody's backyard compost pile, and over a difference of 6 months, the green stuff has nitrogen, the brown stuff has carbon, and the results are on the right-hand side. On the Earth, we have this huge bin of permafrost at the top of the Earth, the biggest compost pile that you've ever thought of. And as the temperature goes up, this mud and organic matter starts to decompose, and when it decomposes, carbon dioxide levels go up. But it lags by 100 to 800 years. So carbon dioxide does track with temperature, but it lags. It doesn't cause the heating. It is because of the heating. But it's used as part of that fairy tale of you have to be careful. The temperature will go up because the carbon dioxide causes it. It doesn't cause it. It just is composting of a huge compost heap of permafrost. And by the way, since we're in Texas, and you hear people talk about this, and it's ridiculous, a cattle, all they do is speed up the composting by 4 to 12 months. Grass, no matter what it passes through after it's composted, is going to have the same amount of carbon dioxide and methane. So, tell people they shouldn't be vegetarians. Now, speaking of BS, how did this all start? And it started with Jimmy Carter in about 1977. Now, I have to make a little confession here. I worked on Jimmy Carter's energy transition team. Sorry about that, but I was young and dumb and didn't know any better. Actually, what I did is, I was a glorified copy boy probably, and I read their list of all their policies. They passed it out to everybody. And as I read that, I went, well, that's dumb. That won't work. That's stupid. And by the time I was done, that's how I became a Republican. But one of the things he said was we only have 36 years of oil remaining. Now, 36 years from 1977 would be 213, right? So 2013, and I didn't notice that we ran out of oil. Matter of fact, we have more than we've ever had before. Right? But this caused the energy independence move to start. And that caused let's investigate windmills, let's investigate solar, and have the government promote that. So I worked in this transition team, then went over to the Department of Energy, and finally ended over at General Electric. General Electric at that time, in about 1979, was the biggest renewable energy producer in the world. They had photovoltaic, solar thermal, and wind energy systems. So one of the first big wind turbines that we made, put on Nob Hill in North Carolina. And after it was dedicated, about 6 months later, the people in North Carolina realized that the maintenance cost, and these often are down about 9 times a year, the maintenance cost exceeded the electricity really generated if you don't have any incentives. So they toppled it over and cut it up for scrap. Now, I did an analysis around this time for Jack Welch. Now, Jack Welch is a wickedly bright guy, and he is a PhD in chemistry. So I did the analysis, and the reason I did that is because my second day on the job at GE, they said, hey, Chet, the guy that was supposed to do this presentation to General Motors isn't here, and in 2 hours you're going to give a presentation on a rotary vane engine that's going to go on the top of RVs. And I'm like, ugh. Okay, but I was the youngest guy there, and I looked at it quick and did the presentation. And then afterwards I said, oh, what did I say? And I looked at it and did a little analysis, and I said, well, I told General Motors that we had a perpetual motion machine. And I said, God, that is really, I feel really stupid. And I said, all right, I'm not going to let that happen again. So now my next phase was to look at the solar world. And GE was asked by the Department of Energy to commit tons of money into the development of solar. Now, this is during the Arab oil embargo. And I did the analysis, and I said, oh my gosh, this will never work. And then they throw in learning curve analysis. So as you make more, the price goes down. You've heard that. If the government just gives more money, eventually the price will come down where it's competitive, right? So I did this. Now you got to watch my hand. It comes down, chunk, down. And I said, even down here, it's not competitive. Because if you could make these solar collectors the same price as billboards, it wouldn't work unless there's subsidies. Now, if there's subsidies, you can make anything work. And then somebody in the back said, what is this? What is this chunk in the learning curve? That's normally smooth. I said, oh, the chunk, I assumed a miracle. So even if you assume a miracle, it didn't make any sense. And Jack Welch looked at it, PhD in chemistry, smart guy, and said, you know what? We've got a $150 million department here, and we're going to close it down. I had folks, I was in my 20s, and I had old guys, 45. And they came up to me and they said, Chet, this isn't good for your career. And I said, well, it's the truth. And I was shuttled over to GE Nuclear in San Jose soon thereafter, but they closed down the department. At the same time, 1981, over in Congress, Al Gore was there. Now, Al Gore is another one of those miscreants that came out of Harvard. And on the internet, it has to be true, they said he didn't do well in science classes and avoided taking math, right? And in 1981, he brought Congress in and said, we have the carbon dioxide is building up, and we have to find substitutes for fossil fuels. And that started things. Now remember, this is the reality, that from back, turn of the century up to 1940, it kept getting warmer. Now, around here is the Dust Bowl. Here is the hottest day in Texas history until a couple years ago. And then global cooling that I was told about as a youngster. And then Al Gore right about here is saying, oh, we have to be concerned about global warming. So there was all sorts of studies. Now, these are 102 studies. And let's just pretend they were all trying to estimate my weight sitting up here. I weigh about 180 pounds. And let's say that the average of the 102, the average of 102 people making the estimate was 360 pounds. And then some of them went up to 540 pounds of me standing here. And none of them thought it was less than 180. You'd go, all these people together are being paid by the government to come up with estimates that are off by, on average, at least a factor of 100%. And some much, much more. You'd say, hey, something's up. This isn't, there's sort of an agenda here. And that's the agenda. You hear about the models say. Well, the models, are terrible. That was polite of me, wasn't it? All right, but it's worse than you think. You notice that this starts in 1972 or 1975? It's very hard to get a model. You can get a model that goes from here to here. But how do you get a model that goes from here to here to here? It's almost impossible. So just get rid of it. And they just started in 1975. And then also, there's some little trickery going on here. This line right here is the zero line. So this is 100% of the temperature, and this is a double. But when you have the graph start way down here, it looks like, it's about, 80%, and yeah, they're a little bit off. But that's not it. It's sort of a tricky thing that you use. You can actually take two straight lines and just change the scale a little bit, and any two straight lines will always line up. I was thinking that my shoe size when I was in high school, running track, was 9.5. I have a manly size 14 boot on right now. So my shoe size has gone from size 9 to size 14. That will be a straight line. I can graph it that way, that it's a straight line. Plano has increased in population quite a bit over these years, and I could make that a straight line. And by changing the scale, I could line them up because I just double the scale until they're both pointing up about a 45-degree angle. And then I could conclude that the change of my shoe size is causing Plano to grow. And that has as much validity as people saying the increase in carbon dioxide is causing the temperature to rise. Now, this is the graph of CO2 from 1940 to 1976. Now, remember, this is the graph of real temperatures. So this is going straight up. This is going down and then up. So how do you make one look like the other? How can you take the claim that the carbon dioxide is causing temperature increase when it caused temperature decrease? Well, it's easy. Just change the graph, change the data. Now, how did they do that? Right? And when this happened in real time, remember, I've lived through all this and always been involved in the sciences during these periods of time. What they did is they added the heat island effect. See, in the old days, if you looked at Paris, we'll use Paris as an example, but every city is like this. On the outside of town, they put up temperature measurement stations, close enough to the town so you could go out and grab it and see what the temperature was every day and record it on a piece of paper. Well, over time, because of probably the growth of somebody's feet, I guess, the towns got bigger and bigger. And they grew out over the temperature measuring station. So if you have a long-term temperature measurement, it used to be in the fields. Now it's in the city surrounded by concrete and it warms up. And you can see here that this is a 5 degree centigrade increase, which is about 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're trying to measure 1.5 degrees and you throw in a good handful of 9-degree increases because of the heat island effect, pretty soon, instead of having the reality of the temperature going down and then going up, you've made it where it's only going up. Now, what we're talking about here is infrared radiation, and that's what that picture was. This is the infrared heat map. So the Earth heats up, and it radiates infrared radiation up into space. Infrared is just past red, and you can't see it, but a rattlesnake could. And if you turn off if you have a gas fireplace and you turn it off, but the ceramic logs in there are still hot, you can feel the heat radiating off. You can't see it, but that's what's happening. Now, if you are warm-blooded, like all of us here, then your own body heat prevents you from seeing that. But if you are a cold-blooded creature, like a rattlesnake or some turtles, let's say, you can see the infrared radiation because there's no body heat to interfere. I understand that Democrats can see it pretty well too. Now, once this story was put out, that increasing carbon dioxide increases the temperature, and oh my God, we're all going to die by 1.5%. Then came the pork, the lobbying, and lobbying for mercy and for the classical energy systems of oil and gas, coal, and then the bid for control, because energy is just one step removed from everything. Everything you make, do, move, comes from energy or is very close to that. So if you control energy, you control everything. And the oil and gas producers had to plead with Congress, say, hey, go easy on us, allow us to continue, and a lot of money flowed to politicians. And then all of the projects that line the pockets, and you've seen a lot of these sort of the solar programs, they go bankrupt. And this was all over. It became pork barrel spending en masse. And this even happened in my small little company back about 1985. Now, I was in the gym business. I had a little chain of athletic clubs, and I wanted to expand it and raise some money. And they were selling windmills, and the government was promoting it with tax credits. The tax credits equaled 100% of the cost. So if I say, hey, April 15th, I'll give you back 100% if you invest some money in windmills, people say, okay, sure. And a lady that lived close to me had a list of leads, and she had raised about $5 million from 1,000 people. And when New Year's Eve came along, that was the end, and she said, okay, that's it. Been a good run. They changed the law, and this will never work. I mean, the people that are involved know that it doesn't work. But nobody's going to buy any more windmills, so I'm going to go to the Bahamas, Made some money while the chance was there, and I asked if she would give me all those leads. And I used to help start my business as a much younger man. Now there was many programs that came up. And remember I said that we did the analysis and said that solar thermal will never work, even if there's a miracle. And this is solar towers out on a big scale. I don't know why they did this, but they did, filled with molten salt outside of Las Vegas, and they burned up. So they're shut down. Yeah, and what happens is the mirrors, if they're a little bit off, they burn everything all the heck. And birds, you could collect a turkey dinner at the base of these towers when birds fly by. So this didn't work. This is one of the, this is a massive system that is really worth nothing and just a complete waste. Nuclear waste has become something that we react against, but nuclear waste has been solved. We know what to do with it. You make a tunnel in the granite. It'll last for a billion years. Put stuff in, backfill it with cement, and leave it there in a metal container. It'll be fine. This is happening in Finland right now. They have a tunnel system in granite to store their nuclear waste. But we've known this since about 1973. It's not a new thing. A new thing that you do hear of is small modular nuclear systems. And both of these companies, one is the one on the right is Rolls-Royce, the other is it's Nuco or something. Both of them are going out of business. And the reason is they have all the delays of a big nuclear plant where it might take 10 years or 12 years to get it approved, but they cost about 60% more because if you have to have 10 pipes to deliver cooling to 10 different modular reactors, it costs more than one big pipe to a big reactor. So these haven't worked, but we're kicking out extra dollars. You're kicking out extra dollars to fund them right now. We did ethanol, and ethanol could not be approved unless it was 20% better on a carbon footprint basis than gasoline. And you think you'd be able to do that, but you got to distill it. You got to make whiskey, basically. And it takes a lot to drive all the water out of the whiskey. And so in the initial analysis, they said had to be 20, so they said it's 21% less. But really, they just had a University of Wisconsin study, and they said, it's really about 24% more because it takes so much to process it. We have EVs, but you have to dig up a lot of rare earths and lithium, and that is a big negative to start off. And it takes about 60,000 miles to break even on a carbon footprint basis. I personally don't know anybody with an EV with more than 60,000 miles. So nobody that I know, and maybe you know more, maybe you have an EV that has more than 60,000 miles. But until you get there, you haven't even broke even on your carbon footprint. And they're more expensive, of course. We have calcium carbonate, that's Tums, White Cliffs of Dover, limestone. There's actually 100 billion tons of limestone around the Earth. It makes up about 15% of the Earth's crust. And you notice the formula there is calcium carbonate, right? So it's CO2 plus calcium oxide, right? And so a huge amount of carbon dioxide has been pulled out of the atmosphere. That's when it was 7,000 parts per million, and it's sequestered and locked into stone. And that would cover about 50 million years worth of concrete production. So we're trying to, we've got to hold back on concrete because, when you heat up limestone, it helps make cement. But we'd have to use, it's 50 million times more is what is just locked into the Matterhorn and every place else. So we're trying to capture CO2, and the cost there is about $200 a ton. So if you have a pickup truck and you load up the back, stuff it as much as you can with wood, that's about a ton. And the carbon dioxide generated, roughly, it would cost you about $200, much more than the wood. to put it back in the ground. And remember, we already have 100 million billion tons sequestered from the carbon dioxide level that we used to have when things were like the Jurassic Park, and they weren't so bad. I mean, that'd be a nice place to live. It looked like it, nice in the film, sort of a Hawaiian vacation spot. But we're trying to, at $200 a ton, mitigate that, which really doesn't make any sense. We also have fusion. Now, this is one of my favorites because I studied it back in 1976, right? And then it was just 20 years away. Now, it's just 20 years away. And the famous little saying among physicists is fusion is just 20 years away and always will be. Now, here's the problem. Fusion, to jam molecules together like in the sun, you have to heat them to 10 million degrees. Now, it's hard to appreciate how hot that is, right? But an example would be if I said, I'll take anybody in this room and I'll give you $1 million. I'll give you $10 million. And I want you to build a car out of beeswax, nothing else, and run it on gasoline. Well, the beeswax will melt, no matter what you do. You can't build a car with the heat of the engine out of you can't build it out of beeswax. I don't care how much money I give you. Well, there's huge amounts of money being poured into fusion, and it's at least 20 years away. And you can tell, this is a big plant. This is not a small plant. Okay, so we have this stuff going on where the carbon dioxide is not causing the warming. The sun, which fluctuates, the sun itself only fluctuates a very little bit, but our orbit is shaped like an egg, and then we point towards the sun and point away from the sun, and that changes things, 6 to 10%. That's a lot. That causes all those oscillations, and we can't do a darn thing about it. There's no one here, no one in government that can reach up and say, well, I'm going to change the tilt of the Earth or the orbit of the Earth around the sun. But we have there's sort of some feedback loops. The more it warms, the more you produce clouds. The clouds reflect sunlight back into space. And then it's cooler. So when it gets warmer, the clouds make it cooler. It's a negative feedback loop, they call that. And that keeps it from getting too hot. And over a long period of time, we've had warmer and colder climates. But the ones that hurt us are when it's really cold. When it's warm, it's fine. We were raised and evolved in equatorial Africa, and we're used to being in a warm climate. Warm climate works well for us. Now, but how can we fix this? And people talked about getting behind all their wood behind one arrow and not infighting among the Republicans. And how we could change things is get behind the idea that CO2, carbon dioxide, is not a pollutant. It's clear. It's not the gray fog that you see in Los Angeles. It's not the yellow, stinky smog that they used to have in Pittsburgh when I drove through that when I was a young guy. It's not the red that you had in the Mesabi iron ore range in northern Minnesota. All those things have been cleaned up. And carbon dioxide is just a clear gas that is already saturated. It's not going to make it any warmer. Matter of fact, it makes the world a better place because it increased crop yields. And we actually should pay people money to burn more carbon dioxide. And in greenhouses, that's exactly what they do. They hook up a greenhouse and they hook up a propane tank and they just burn it to put carbon dioxide into the greenhouse, and then whatever they're growing grows faster. And if we did that, if we were doing things in the world and we vent carbon dioxide in the world, it is fine. It's actually a little bit of a net plus. So change things so the EPA cannot list CO2 as a pollutant. And if they can't do that, then they can't really control energy. A second thing is change the goal. Right now, the goal is preventing climate change. With the fairy tale that, well, we have to prevent carbon dioxide generation. And that means efficiency in anything. Anything that improves efficiency, we have a part of that. Anything that burns fuel, we have a part of that. And then we come up with some substitutes, and the government has a part of that. So the government has, with the idea of preventing climate change, and of course that means if it gets warm, it's climate change. If it gets cold, it's climate change. That's a great scam. Instead, have a low-cost energy goal, getting rid of subsidies, because there's big money to be made in energy. You don't have to have the government subsidize it. And remember, I talked about the windmill that was tipped over back about 1980. We've had these big, huge windmills around for 20 years, plus 23, 43 years. And people are still saying, well, once we get a little more experience, this will be really good. Oh, they'll be cheap. But it only works that way because the government sponsors the sale. The government pays money when it can't produce, and it pays money when it does produce. So this is just a long-standing scam going on. The government doesn't have to have these projects. People will take care of themselves if they make sense. During this period of time between 1980 and 2023, think of the development of the cell phone. It ripped forward because it makes great sense. People say that wind power makes great sense, but it doesn't rip forward. It only goes forward when somebody else is picking up the tab, like that gal that went to the Bahamas when they stopped the tax rebate. You don't pay, it'll just stop. And we have many regulations that inhibit the free market, get rid of them, and the energy mandates and reporting just strangle people. And the idea that I see is happening, we have global milding going on. And it's getting a little bit warmer because of the sun, not because of carbon dioxide. That's good. We like that. And people don't move to retire from Phoenix to the Yukon. They go from Minnesota to Texas because people like it a little bit warmer. Matter of fact, during my lifetime, the entire United States has moved south about 99 miles. Okay? Now, during my lifetime, the temperature of the United States has increased a couple degrees. Remember, it went down and got colder, and then it went up. So during that going up period, it went up a couple degrees. The couple degrees is the same as moving south 99 miles. So this entire debate on climate is to prevent the change in temperature that you get if you moved 99 miles. And if I moved 99 miles, I wouldn't know it at all. 1/10 the difference between here and Minnesota, which is 20 degrees colder. And in order to make this accomplished, we have to defeat this problem of the infighting you were talking about. And I made a brief foray into the Salem witch trials in the very beginning. We all know that's a bad thing to burn women at the stake. Everybody knows that's a bad thing. I hope that you now know that the restriction on classic energies, the burning of oil and gas and coal, it's a bad thing. It costs a lot to replace, and when you take $5 million out of the economy, for every 5 million, over a long period of time, it deprives one life. And you could think of it, if you took 100 families and had your niece give 100 families $50,000 each, over the course of time, maybe one life would be saved because of better medical care, better nutrition, and so forth. And statistically, it works out that way. So every 5 million, it's one person. The government is talking about having $5 trillion committed to this global energy crisis. Well, that translates to 1 million people, 1 million Americans losing their lives because the quality of life is worse over a long period of time when you take that much money from them. Keep in mind that for every $1 trillion, if you're an average tax-paying family, that costs you $10,000. 1 trillion, there's 100 million families in the United States, $10,000 per trillion. They're talking about 5 trillion for these renewals. That means they want to charge your family, maybe not you, maybe it's your kids, $50,000 to make this work. That's not a good solution, right? So we want to try to fix that. And how they did that in Salem is the governor of Massachusetts was a tough guy. And he said, hey, we're no longer going to burn women at the stake. Just knock it off. And we need that sort of leadership to get these crazy environmental laws put in place. And we need to get behind that tough leader that's going to make things work. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If there's an interesting little thing here. This is Bill Gates. So Bill Gates he's a climate fanatic, sort of. But lately, it says, how to avoid a climate disaster. And he says, and that's a quote, there's a lot of climate exaggeration out there. The climate is not the end of the planet, so the climate is going to be fine.